everyone, and welcome to today's Wednesday webinar at 1, brought to you by the CFA UK Inclusion and Diversity Network. My name is Tinashe, and I'm a member of the Network Committee, and our goal is to work towards building a better investment profession by finding tangible, practical ways to progress inclusion and diversity in the workplace, primarily within the asset management industry. During the webinar today, Dominie Moss will report on findings from the Return Hub's report, Recruiting Women in the 21st Century. The report surveyed female candidates looking to return to work in financial services following a career break. It explores their experiences and attitudes in detail and is supplemented with some employer case studies. Dominie has over 20 years' experience in the financial sector, predominantly within executive search, and established the Return Hub in 2016. The Return Hub connects women with a CV gap to organisations with a female talent gap, and the Return Hub has conducted extensive research on the returner topic. And at the end of the session, there'll be some time for questions. So, Dominie, over to you.
Hello, thank you very much, Timothy, and thank you everybody here for joining us today. And thank you also to the CFA's UK Inclusion and Diversity Network for giving us the platform to share our new research. As the first recruitment company of our kind, the Return Hub is at the forefront of the development of a changing recruitment landscape. We work with employers looking for strategies to help them hire and retain top senior female talent. And since launching the business, we've become experts on this topic. We have learned an awful lot, and the landscape is moving quickly. Much of this change has come because of policy initiatives through government, and two of the main drivers of change have been the Women in Finance Charter introduced in 2015, and more recently the introduction of the gender pay gap legislation in 2017. And we're just about to see the second year of reporting due in early April. Since we contributed to the first APPG report in 2016, we have grown our network in the Return Hub from around 400 to over 2,000, and we feel that this was a good opportunity to update the initial research and share our findings with interested stakeholders. Sorry, I'm just going to change that. And at this point, a word about our own business and what sort of work we are involved in. Essentially, the Return Hub is like any other search firm, but unique in that we recruit from a pool of returners that would otherwise be very, very difficult to find. We are a team of 6 ex-city professionals who understand very well what good looks like for a city employer, and we work with firms who are setting out to strategically tap into this talent pool and understand what they need to do to make those hires successful. We also campaign to promote the benefits to employers generally of hiring from this pool of returners and bust some of the myths and assumptions that exist about women returning to the workforce. We also support our candidates through targeted learning and help in getting them ready for work. Almost half our candidates have 49% have 10 to 20 years of work experience. A third have had a break for longer than 5 years, but 40% have been away less than 2 years. Most have a degree and almost half have postgraduate qualification. Others have additional CFA, accountancy and legal qualifications. We were very grateful for the opportunity from the Women in Work APPG group for allowing us a platform to conduct our survey, and are looking forward to sharing some of the key findings with you from that over the next 20 minutes or so. And there should be about 15 minutes at the end for some Q&A, so please do have your questions ready for that. In the meantime, it would be good to know why some of you are here today, so please let me know by typing into the comments box. For example, are you potentially looking to relaunch or transition your career? Or are you an employer looking for ways to broaden your recruitment strategy, or something else? But we'd love to know what. So I'm just going to give you a moment to answer that question.
Please use the Q&A box for that.
Okay, great. So do keep those answers coming in. What have we got? A bit of a mix. Industry trends, interested in initiatives to support women, employers, career repositioning, considering relaunching. Okay, super. So a real variety of reasons. That's great. Okay. So for the research, we surveyed 254 female candidates who are looking to return to work in financial services following a career break. We also conducted 6 in-depth interviews with male and female candidates who are currently looking to return to explore their experiences and attitudes in more detail. We supplemented these by speaking to several employers, including Aon, Royal London and Reddington, who work with the Return Hub to get a flavour of employer attitudes. And this report will go through the key findings. So 2 years on, has anything changed? Well, much has happened in the 2 years since our last submission. The introduction of gender pay gap reporting highlighted the well-known yet deep-set inequalities of our workplaces. Centenary celebrations of suffrage and the hashtag #MeToo and Time's Up movement have inspired greater focus on gender inequality than ever before. Yet data released in September from the FCA found that of 9,957 partners at private equity firms, hedge funds, and other financial services companies, only 14% are women. This percentage has increased by just 2% in the past 5 years, despite initiatives to encourage female applicants, and the government's Women in Finance Charter, and the scrutiny generated by gender pay gap reporting. As we move towards the second reporting deadline, firms of 250 plus are turning their attention yet again to the stats in preparation for their 2019 gender pay gap submissions. And a key part of these reports will be the supporting narratives that are published alongside the statistics, which tell a more in-depth tale of the actions that they are taking to address gender diversity. Our work with women returning to careers in the city reiterates the difficulties faced by women in the capital. Not all those who take career breaks are women, not all career breakers are parents, and not all returners want to work part-time. But these myths and others have created barriers that need to come down. A more systemic culture change is needed if women are to progress as frictionlessly as their male counterparts. And for companies who are under pressure to show progress towards closing their gender pay gap, women returning to senior roles are a key ingredient in protecting and enhancing their corporate reputation. So our research has focused on what can be done to help more senior women return to work and what the barriers are. In our survey, we revisited some of the questions we had asked in our original survey to see whether there had been any changes. So we asked, what are the 2 main barriers preventing women from returning to work? So 2/3 of our respondents cite reluctance from employers to hire someone with a CV gap as the main barrier preventing women returning to work. This is up 8% from our 2016 findings. Half, or just over half, 53%, say the lack of clear path back via traditional recruiting channels is one of the main barriers to returning. And this is up 6% from our 2016 findings. To talk in a bit more detail about these 2 things, ever since I started an executive search, hiring managers have been trained to query a gap on a CV. It has traditionally been seen as a bad thing, with people questioning why this candidate can't get a job. Reversing some of those biases take time, particularly when managers are faced with a candidate who is currently in market as a comparable. These are some of the things candidates see as big barriers preventing women from returning to work. The biggest barrier, which has increased since the last survey we ran, is the perception that there is no clear path back. At mid and senior level, professionals are often hired through an executive search process. The search company will look on behalf of the employer to hire mid-senior level people. A talent pool of returners who are not in the market, not easily visible, they are simply not found through traditional search methods and therefore will not be included on shortlists. And that, together with online job applications and jobs boards which filter out applications from candidates with a career gap, and recruitment agencies at the volume end of the market focused on time to hire, means that they really are square pegs for a round hole. It is clear that the recruitment industry is not really fit for purpose when it comes to returners. So perhaps surprisingly, the cost of childcare was slightly lower down the list of barriers previously, but still significant, with just under 50% of respondents identifying it as an obstacle. Now, interestingly, since 2016, the number of respondents who consider childcare to be a central barrier to returning to work has halved, down from 49% to 24%. Now, given the small sample size, we are cautious about reading too much into this finding, but some possible explanations could be that there is a misconception that all returners take career breaks to have children. 45% of our respondents took a break for reasons other than childcare, which may explain why childcare costs are less likely to be considered a barrier to returning. The Return Hub candidate pool has also got more senior than when we surveyed them 2 years ago, so those who do have children may have higher salary expectations now or have older children. Some progress is also being made to accommodate working parents in the workplace. Almost 1 in 10 of our respondents cite a lack of flexibility as a barrier to work. So flexible and agile working patterns are undoubtedly part of the solution. However, it is not only women who that is true for, and flexibility can be a bit of a catch-all term. Flexibility should not just be a perk exclusive to those with longevity of service or seniority. In particular, we need to be clear about the distinction between formal and informal flexibility. The default assumption that all female candidates want to be part-time is unhelpful and contributes to the bias against people who have taken a break to care for children. Instead, candidates we work with have negotiated a range of agile working options up front, including the ability to work from home and being trusted to leave at 4, for example, but check in again at 7 p.m. Trust and grown-up working relationships are key to this. Equally, where roles are not explicitly advertised as flexible, otherwise very well-qualified candidates may reject those positions despite the good intentions of progressive, inclusive employers. We know from our work with large financial services firms that many employers are willing to offer this. This creates a double bind where never the twain shall meet. An apparent lack of flexibility does not always tell the whole story, and valuable candidates might be cancelling themselves out of the conversation prematurely. Our research among candidates and our experience talking to employers indicates that challenging attitudes to CV gaps would address a more significant barrier faced by women returning to work. So let's talk a little bit about employer attitudes and the results. The challenge of unconscious bias and its impact on recruitment practices is increasingly well established. However, our survey suggests that there is also a conscious perception problem when it comes to those who have taken career breaks. 60% of our respondents felt that prospective employers see them as less committed because they have had a career break. 3/4 believe that taking time out has limited their career prospects and chances of progression. Over half believe the financial services sector isn't interested in creating a diverse workforce. Our survey respondents were divided on the best way to approach this challenge when looking for a new role, which also reflects our experience helping candidates prepare for interviews. Just over a quarter, 28.5%, prefer not to mention they have taken a career break, whereas almost half do discuss their break. Interestingly, more than 1 in 5 candidates report feeling embarrassed about their career break, suggesting it is not only employers who hold negative perceptions of CV gaps. Employers we work with agree that returners often find it difficult to demonstrate that they have kept their knowledge and skills up to date or acquired new and relevant skills while taking time out from the industry compared to someone already in an equivalent position. They accepted that there may be some bias about how candidate skills might have expired or not be as sharp as someone currently in a role, especially with technical roles such as IT. Some employers have also taken steps to address biases in recruitment. So Royal London, for example, provide all people managers with unconscious bias training and coach people managers to consider past achievements and other relevant skills and experiences gained during their time out of the industry. They often find candidates have taken on charity, trustee and campaign type work, and some have even set up their own business, which enables them to showcase their skills in other ways. Real change needs to come from line managers to combat the male-dominated culture of the city and the biases against candidates with non-traditional career progression. Employees with diverse experience and transferable skills can make a hugely positive impact on the productivity and culture of a workplace. Yet there is a danger that certain sectors, including financial services, allow outdated negative perceptions of those who have taken a break from their career to overshadow the potential they offer. It is our view that real change needs to come from line managers who hold the key to most hiring decisions. Employers with diverse experience can make hugely positive impacts, yet can be seen as a more risky option. Interviewers can actively address some of their unconscious biases by interacting with people unlike themselves. For example, networking, interacting with people from different departments, collaborating with different teams, mentoring and supporting someone unlike yourself, or have a mentor from someone who is outside your usual network. Internal marketing, ensuring employees and candidates are aware of existing flexible working policies. And then there's training hiring managers, helping them, giving them a toolkit to understand the business drivers for diverse talent acquisition and how to assess and onboard someone who isn't the usual candidate. Sorry, thanks. So employer attitudes. One of the employers in the city that we work with is Royal London, and we looked at the various initiatives that they have implemented to help them achieve a more diverse workforce. They consciously chose to work with the Return Hub to promote their employment opportunities to candidates who are interested in returning to work after a career break, but they also offer career taster sessions to encourage internal job mobility and insight into work programmes for all their members. In making these strategic changes to their recruitment strategy, Royal London has broadened their search parameters beyond the more obvious and traditional routes in order to attract people from diverse backgrounds. They also actively do not use AI in their recruitment process and understand the value of human conscious decision-making in the hiring process, rather than relying on automated filtering of candidates through algorithms. They provide all their hiring managers with conscious bias training. Some of the employers that contributed to our research well understand that achieving full equality across all diversities is a journey and not just a tick box exercise. There is a key role for senior leadership here in taking brave and bold steps to implement change, and in particular for senior men to act as sponsors and agents for change, something that has been echoed recently by the government following the Government Equality Office's paper, Men as Change Agents, Achieving Gender Balance in Business Leadership and Closing the Gender Pay Gap. So motivation for taking a break. I'm just going to talk about some further results from the research now. So if we are collectively conscious that taking a career break can have a negative impact on your prospects, why do employees still take them? The assumption is that most people take a break to care for children, but for almost half, 44% of our candidates say that that is not the case. Of these, 13% took extra time to care for someone in their family other than a child, 12% were made redundant, and 6% took longer than 12 months out of the workforce to move abroad. Just over half of our respondents did take a break to care for children, and of those, 70% took more than 12 months to spend more time with their children. And interestingly, 18% were made redundant whilst on parental leave. Just 10% said the cost of childcare made it financially unviable to return to work, which may reflect the higher salary expectations of the highly skilled financial services candidates in our network. There are a lot of misconceptions about career breakers, primarily that most women returners want to work part-time and that they all took time out from working to care for children. Yet this does not reflect the reality of the candidates we work with, 73% of whom are looking for full-time opportunities. The amount of time out of the workforce and the amount of experience gained before taking a break also appear to impact on the extent of the perception of barriers faced when returning. Just under half our candidates have between 10 to 20 years of work experience before taking their break. A quarter have 5 to 10 years, 16% had more than 20 years, and fewer than 1 in 10, 9%, had less than 5 years experience. So our survey respondents have a good number of years under their belt before deciding to take time out of work, for a variety of reasons and for varying periods. In terms of time away, 42% of our candidates have had between 0 to 2 years out, 27% between 2 to 5 years out, and 31% more than 5 years. I'm going to go on now and talk about returnships, and you'll see here some of the quotes and comments that we received on this topic. In 2016, the Women in Work APPG report recommended that all employers should consider putting in place returnships. Many of you will have heard of a returnship, but for those of you that haven't, the first returnship was introduced by Goldman Sachs in 2008 in the US, and the concept came over to the UK in about 2014. This returnship is a low-risk structure for the employer to bring someone back into the workplace. Based on a traditional internship structure, the employee gains CV-worthy experience while being assessed in a real business situation, usually for a period of between 12 and 16 weeks, and the hope is that there will be a job at the end. In 2017, the company Women Returners found that there were just 37 employers offering major returnship programs. But since then, the government has created a returners fund, which awarded £500,000 to 5 organisations to help support mothers and carers to return to the workforce. And there is now thought to be about 70 programmes in the UK. Many of our candidates have been beneficiaries of these schemes, with 32.4% of our respondents having been part of a return to work programme or similar. But since the initial introduction of returnships, we have seen a variety of structures emerge aimed at encouraging returners back to work. They include workshops, usually run over a day or two, and include training sessions to help with CV writing, interview skills, and meeting hiring managers. Although very often this structure, there is not usually a job at the end. And then supported hiring, essentially bringing back returners into business as usual roles with some kind of enhanced onboarding. This for us is the ideal way forward, as our clients want to hire more women into their workforce and candidates want a real job, not an internship. Of the respondents who had been on a return to work programme or similar, just over a third found the experience somewhat effective, whereas a quarter felt that they were not effective. Beyond returnships, 2/3 of our respondents felt that hiring managers should be incentivised to promote flexible working. So employers should be encouraged to consider ways to make all roles more flexible. And as I said, here on the screen are some quotes from our respondents who have been on a return to work programme. Some, as you can see, felt that they were run for political and PR reasons, could be patronising and assume skills are out of date. There is an overriding feeling that whilst programmes can help build confidence, they often don't result in a real job, although that is not obviously everyone's experience. So, a significant proportion of our respondents felt their returnships were not effective, and whilst a special scheme sounds good, there is a risk that returnships are perceived as a corporate tick box exercise which do not create real jobs. Equally, some returning candidates feel uncomfortable being marked out as requiring special measures, feeling this separates them from colleagues. One issue that needs to be considered is that the semantics around these interventions are not consistent, so not all schemes are created equal. Some companies have started to catch on to this and look for other ways to engage the talent they are looking for. And we believe we need an evolution of returnships which create and promote a next generation of return to work paths that offer a genuine route to full-time employment or permanent employment. So moving on to skills and confidence, and we asked our respondents, what skills do you think you have developed during your career break? Employers and candidates alike expressed concerns about a prospective employee's ability to maintain their skills when taking a career break. Yet for almost all of our respondents, their career break was a valuable source of development. Approximately 41% of our placed candidates relaunched their financial services careers after working in another capacity or running their own business. The APPG's 2016 report on returners recommended that both government and employers should support greater recognition of the skills developed whilst carrying out caring responsibilities, and we believe much more work needs to be done in this area. Our team works with many impressive women returning to city careers after time out to have children, who say it is hard to get job interviews, despite their experience and qualifications. In many cases, that is down to them being ejected from application processes due to having non-standard CVs. For some firms, automated recruitment, AI sifting of CVs, or chatbots conducting first-round interviews is amplifying this unintended side effect, quickly filtering out applicants who might have non-standard CVs or could be rough diamonds in other ways. In 2016, just 5.6% of our respondents felt that difficulty updating their skills was a significant barrier to returning. In 2018, that number rose to 9.6%, possibly reflecting the continued pace of technological and regulatory change in financial services, but it nevertheless remains less than 1 in 10. Our survey captured the skills our candidates felt they developed during career breaks. Four out of 5 of our returners agree that their time out has taught them valuable skills that will be a benefit to the work environment. 3/4 of respondents felt that they had become more resilient during their career break, and 58% believe their time management skills improved. 77% cited increased emotional intelligence as a key skill gained during their time out of the workplace, and over half considered themselves better people managers through experience gained on their time out. Just 2% believed that they had learnt nothing. Despite this, 7 out of 10 felt their time out of the workforce dented their confidence, and over 1/4 believed that this is a key barrier to their return to the workforce. So, do employers value the skills of those who have taken a break? Employers that we work with suggested that returning candidates bring a wide range of skills back to the workplace. Maturity, a sense of perspective, broader views, and a diversity of thought. Those employers shared their experiences of candidates who had taken on other types of work during their time out of the industry, not limited to, but including charitable roles, trustee positions, raising awareness of social impact issues, and even running their own businesses, which all provide valuable and transferable skills and perspectives. Intentionally or not, some recruitment practices make it easier for companies to hire more people who are like the people who already work there, because it's easier just to wave in ones who match their existing employee mould rather than spend time searching out and assessing new kinds of people to join. This kind of approach means only square pegs get interviews, and the CVs of equally talented round pegs fall by the wayside. Those who have taken time out to care, to travel, to study, to be entrepreneurs, possess valuable skills that can benefit prospective employers, including resilience, improved time management, and emotional intelligence. And government and employers need to encourage those skills in modern workforces to meet the productivity challenges of today. Confidence in their skills and confidence that employers will recognise these skills is also a key issue here. We would argue that women with high-flying careers in the city, in top marks in higher and further academic education, who face a dramatic loss of confidence when taking a break from the workforce, are the visible canary in the mine. If even those with academic and financial privilege are impacted by self-esteem issues whilst on career breaks, then the prospects for those without such advantages are even more concerning. Compromising on pay remains a huge problem for returners. We asked our respondents, when thinking about return to work, are you or did you lower your salary expectations? And this compromise on pay, which remains a problem, is one that is linked to both the potential bias against CV gaps and the structural imbalance of women in the workforce. Whilst there are many firms in the city making great efforts to move the needle on gender diversity, the scale of the challenge for the financial services sector was laid bare by 2018's gender pay gap publications, with gaps of 40 to 60% in leading names in the world's top insurance, accountancy, banking, and asset management firms. The industry also revealed a bonus gap of 67%. So for every £100,000 in bonuses given to men, women get just 33,000. Enlightened firms know they are in trouble and are actively looking for solutions to diversity and inclusion challenges. Yet only 5% of those who reported gender pay gap figures in 2018 have set targets for reducing the gap. Whilst efforts to bring more young women into the pipeline and into sectors where they have been traditionally underrepresented are worthwhile and a good thing, it's likely to take years for this move to have a positive effect. In the interim, tapping into the talent pool of experienced women who've taken a break to study, to parent, to care for elderly relatives, or to launch entrepreneurial businesses is already seen by many companies as a quicker win. It helps make an impact on gender pay gap numbers immediately, but the real value is the skills, talent and experience gained whilst away from the sector that they bring back into an organisation. However, the impact on gender pay gap of hiring more experienced women is being depressed by the expectation that those women have when it comes to negotiating their salary with a prospective employer. We asked, when thinking about returning to work, are you or did you lower your salary expectations? So more than 3/4, 79%, of our candidates expect to get paid less after taking a career break. Almost half have lowered their salary expectations by 20% or more. 2 out of 5 thought that they would definitely receive a smaller bonus compared to that of a normal or linear employee. The question of salary history is problematic across the board. Salary history is not an accurate indicator of current market worth, particularly for those who may have had an elongated career break. To encourage real diversity across city workplaces, a greater salary transparency is needed throughout recruitment practices. So that comes to the end of the research. And in summary, whilst lots of progress has been made in the last 2 years, as we start to see firms publishing their gender pay gap reports, it will be interesting to see whether this will be reflected in the figures. I think it unlikely to be drastically different. However, the important thing is that change is afoot, so a closer look into company narratives accompanying their report is likely to yield a more promising story of the shifts that are taking place. In my opinion, however, there is still much work to be done. So I'd like to take your questions.
Thank you very much. So we will now move to questions and see what has come through. So the first question is this a survey of candidate biases, as they're not objective questions of employer attitudes?
So I'm not sure I understand. This is a questionnaire that was sent to candidates that are registering on our database that are looking to return to work after a break. Yeah.
And the next question, how does one make the recruiters more efficient in this case? Because they are driven by commission and margins, i.e. it's not only the recruiting organisation or candidate as a product.
Yeah, I mean, employers very much get the recruitment that they deserve, if you like. There is, when we talk to employers about diversity and tapping into different pools of talent and the assessment that needs to go on in order to kind of really add value to that process, I always do try and make it very clear that if they really want to do something different, they need to accept the fact that it's going to cost them more money and it's going to take more time. And trying to solve this problem through sort of a kind of low cost, cheap process efficiency type route isn't going to get them where they want to be. You get sort of various different responses to that. Recruitment agencies and search firms are commercial organisations themselves, so they obviously have to, to remain viable, have to resource themselves appropriately. So it really is up to the employer to essentially mandate and fund and resource an organisation that's doing the recruiting for them to kind of spend more time and go and look in different places. But the reality is that search firms are really not set up to do that. They basically are, their model is to be incredibly sector focused. They have a very narrow focus but incredibly deep knowledge of the sectors that they focus on, and frankly it's very difficult for them to have the bandwidth to sort of go outside of that, and frankly probably history tells them that ultimately the person that gets hired is the person who's the square peg. So it really needs to come from the top of the employer organisations to empower, whether it's their own internal HR or their external search providers, to go and do something different.
And quite nicely following on from that, another question's come through that says, how does the advent of back office robotics impact this in the context of changing work patterns?
What, from a recruitment perspective? Sorry, again, I'm not really understanding. The recruitment, so back office robotics in a recruitment firm. Well, I think it exacerbates the problem, frankly. I mean, again, sort of not wishing to sort of talk too much about my own business anymore, but that is one of the reasons why I launched the business, is because it became very apparent to me that the recruitment industry is, the agency end, it's about square pegs, square holes, and time to hire. When a company is hiring at the volume end, they will probably mandate 2 or 3 or 4 firms, and it's a race to the finish line for that recruitment agency that can get the most, least risky, most suitable, most obvious candidate in a job the fastest. So again, that doesn't really, and that's exacerbated by back office automation and robotics and machines that allow that to happen faster and quicker. And then, search firms, the way they tackle things, I mean, they don't really have sort of back office robotics in terms of facilitating a search process or a filtering process. That is done by sort of human, that's a human being kind of process, or a human kind of searching for that other candidate. But again, the methods that they use to do that are all about identifying talent in competitor organizations doing the same job. I mean, that's the shortlist, if you like, that is created through a search process. So it's both of those things, to my mind, that are one of the many, many kinks in the recruitment talent pipeline that exist.
And the next question is, to what extent is what you've articulated, to what extent is that like to differ for men, in the case of men returning to work?
So we have a much, much, much smaller sample size when it comes to men. So we just don't have the data in the same way that we do for women. We are delighted to see more and more men registering with us. And, we are about, people who've had a career break or a non-linear career. They just happen to mostly be women. But I think obviously as time moves on, we will see more and more men come onto our radar, and frankly, I think they probably face some of the very same challenges. One doesn't necessarily want to be stereotyping sort of half the population to be X or Y, but I imagine that they will face some of the same challenges, particularly when it comes to the automated process or the automated decision making. So an algorithm will kick you out of a jobs board application process, not because you're a man or a woman, but because you've got a gap on your CV, or your CV is non-linear in some way. When it comes to some of the other challenges around, some of the sort of more softer things like competence, for example, I mean, I imagine that they probably have some of the similar challenges. But everyone's different, right? We are, after all, talking about human beings.
Dominie, what would encourage an employer to change the way they recruit? I mean, if an employer goes through this automated process and gets pretty much people in its own mold, at which point would an employer say, we have to do something different?
So I really think it has to come from the top. It has to come from leadership, and the leadership has to take some kind of ownership for empowering those individuals underneath them, whether it's the mid-level hiring managers or HR or recruitment team, to do something differently. I mean, one of the key things that I personally think is a huge issue is the internal recruiting teams that sit within organizations that are incentivized to find talent themselves and to do it very quickly. So internal teams in big firms will have these as some of their sort of key performance metrics, time to hire being one. And obviously how many, reduce the cost of spend of using outside, third parties. And that makes it very difficult for, it's very difficult for those internal recruiters to then have time, when they're working on maybe 40, 50 roles, to have the time or the bandwidth to go and find that person who's not in an obvious place on LinkedIn looking like they're a perfect fit, and that's not their fault. I mean, that's what they're, that's what they're being driven to do. And so I think organizations need to unpick that, those messages that they're sending down to their recruitment team to empower them to say, we're going to give you the bandwidth and the money to go and do something slightly different. And, that's got to come from the top. But there is no doubt a tension between organizations saying one message, which is reduce recruitment spots cost, do it in-house, etc., and we need to hire more diverse talent.
Yes.
The two don't really
Yes.
fit together very well.
So we have another question that's come through that is, why is being an entrepreneur and running your own enterprise being seen as a gap on a resume?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I mean, it's not really a gap. It's just a different route. It's basically just looking at a career as a ladder or a jungle gym. I mean, Cheryl, sorry, I was going to say Cheryl Cole, not Cheryl Cole. Sheryl Sandberg, in her book LinkedIn, talks about women's careers being more like she uses an American expression, a jungle gym versus a ladder. And I think this is really the point about why CVs can get kicked out of a process, or perhaps using the word a non-linear CV is perhaps better than a CV gap. It's really just about a career being not being a sort of straight up and down path where you've done the same role but for a bit more money and a bit more responsibility, sort of, but actually someone who's gone and done something different. And it's the doing something different bit that means that they often get filtered out through automated processes, or even, a human being who's thinking, well, I'm not gonna, a recruitment agent who's looking at CVs, might have a pile of CVs, isn't going to get fired for putting forward the obvious, less risky candidate who's currently doing that job at a competitor. I mean, it's just, what's the risk reward for them? There's a lot of downside potentially, and not, maybe some upside, but maybe not. Maybe some quite big downside. So,
okay, one last question, maybe.
So one question has come through, almost a statement / question, saying that I can see the label returner might bring some baggage. Is there a better expression that we could use?
It's an excellent question, and one that we think about a lot. If anyone has any suggestions that's listening in today, please do put them forward. I mean, for us, we're really trying to sort of own the returner label and just redefine it, and bust some of the myths about returners, and sort of educate around the word returner rather than discarding it, because it's really about educating really, and saying that we often talk about there being 3 big myths about returners. 1, that they're all women, 2, they're all mothers, and 3, they all want to work part-time. And when we go and actually talk to employers about the data that we hold on our candidates, what skills they've got, what sector they come from, what have they all been doing while they've fallen off the radar. And it's really about returning from entrepreneurship, returning from an MBA, returning from, you may have been working in America, but you're coming back to the UK. So you're returning to your, to the UK, or it might be that you're, returning from all sorts of things, charity work, board work, etc., etc. So it's for us, it's really about diving a little bit deeper into what the term returner actually means. I hope that's a helpful answer.
Oh, thank you, Dom. Thank you, Tin. An excellent webinar, and I wish you all a good afternoon. And I look forward to seeing you next week.